Hello and welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you today about the latest trends in 360 assessments. My name is Peter Berry. I'm the Managing Director of Peter Berry Consultancy. We're a boutique consultancy firm operating in Sydney, Australia. We are the distributor for Hogan Assessments, and 20 years ago we designed our own 360, which was launched 10 years ago as the Hogan 360. And we are responsible for the benchmarks, the research, the white papers, and the administration of the Hogan 360 globally in 17 languages. It's been a very exciting journey the last 20 years, and I'm going to share my insights with you today. The latest trends, always very, very interesting to reflect on what are the most recent trends. The biggest trend from 15 years ago is moving away from one-on-one 360s, often for a problem manager, where we're trying to fix a problem child, so to speak, and there was often just a single feedback session, and then that was the end of it. No real development plan, no accountability, no repeat 360, and now it's moved to a very mainstream HR practice. In fact, I would go so far as to say in better organisations, it's become a mainstream strategic practice owned by the CEO and the C-suite, used holistically throughout the business because leadership drives engagement and engagement drives performance, and it starts with measuring leadership. So 4 key trends at the moment. Number one, the 360 is used at all levels of personnel decisions. You might get your first 360 as a frontline leader, then a middle manager, then you've moved into the C-suite, so it's an ongoing health check for the whole of your career. It's used to assess the leader leading a high-performing team, for example. It's used in executives where they share their 360s and produce a collective 360 to look at their strengths and opportunities. It's used to identify high potentials. It's even used internally for succession planning. Number 2, it's increasingly used with personality assessments, and we absolutely love having the personality assessments, which is the private person, the person below the waterline, then adding the 360, the public person in the workplace, the person above the waterline. And I always say, give me the personality and the 360 and there is no place to hide. We've got all the data we need to understand holistically the person and their reputation and what needs to be improved. Number 3, there's a lot more science coming into the coaching. Science, the validity, the reliability, the benchmarking is used to support best practice coaching and leadership development programs. The science, quite simply, is using well-validated assessments, both personality and 360, to then inform the coaching practices and even to have a repeat 360 12 or 18 months on. The absence of any assessments means the coaching is not a scientific approach. I don't know how you can coach unless you have the data to inform the coaching practice. Number 4, I'm pleased to report there's a lot more science that has crept into the better 360s. In other words, they have a technical manual to support the reliability and validity. They have benchmarks, so a score within an enterprise can be scored, can be benchmarked externally. We have those benchmarks globally across all industries, and you can prove the reliability and validity from the bank of items and the rigor that lies behind it. So unfortunately, not all 360s are created equally, so you do need to look for the technical manual, the reliability and validity, and the external benchmarks. So the philosophy that we use, and it's not our philosophy alone, but we passionately believe that leadership drives engagement and engagement drives performance. So leadership is the most consequential force on the planet. It can have at least 50% of the impact on the team or the employees and their engagement, and out of that comes the bottom line business performance. So if leadership is so consequential, it's got to be measured and it's got to be improved, And with our assessments, we can do both, measure and improve. And obviously the benefits should go straight to the bottom line. And it opens up a fascinating conversation about people and business analytics and getting a return on investment. Gallup research. Gallup are one of the great global providers of employee engagement surveys. There's a whole range of brilliant ones out there, from Aon Hewitt, Sirota, Culture Ramp. And Gallup research shows that up to 70% of the variance in engagement can be attributed to the actual manager of the team. Other clients of mine would say it's around about 50%. So I don't really care whether it's 50% or 70%. The key point here is the individual leader has the biggest impact on the team, the engagement and the performance. So therefore, we ought to measure it, we ought to improve it, we ought to coach it, and because it's so consequential. The outcomes of engagement are fourfold. So we want to see a balanced scorecard of returns. Firstly, the revenue. It could be revenue is going up, supported by sound EBITDA or profit levels. You've then got the customer experience, the net promoter scores, and then you've got productivity and safety, very important metrics, and of course the employee retention, absenteeism and wellness. So engagement pays, that's the short and the long of it. So therefore an investment in engagement is a very wise investment in the bottom line. 360s are becoming more strategic. I mentioned earlier, 15 years ago, they were one-off for addressing a problem manager. Then they became a mainstream HR practice and now really a strategic practice across the whole of the enterprise. So three aspects of being strategic. Number one, we do want to use 360s to measure the employee engagement and build a high-performing team, but that's not the ultimate goal. If you stop there, it's not best practice. Number two, the point of having the employee engagement and the high-performing team is to deliver the strategic business plan, the key performance indicators, so to speak. So ultimately, we want to make sure that 360 feedback is part of an holistic coaching or leadership program about delivering the strategy and building that high-performing culture to enable sustainable, ongoing, best-in-class performance. So number two here, the point of leadership effectiveness is to outperform the competition. So the business plan ought to be about what does winning look like. It's got to be longer term and short term, and it's got to be sustainable. And point three, the strategic piece, another piece of the pie, organisations are looking at return on investment. If we're going to have this spend on leadership programs, how do we measure the outcomes? So return on investment can be measured by individual success, the career of the person, their repeat 360, the impact they have on their team or the employee engagement, and of course the organisational results. Not everybody is measuring return on investment, but a majority would like to go down that path. So if you're going to go down that journey, you need to have a lot of rigour around your data. People and business analytics, I love this area. I know that Shell, for them it's the holy grail and they will speak for themselves. But here in Australia and with some of our global clients, we're doing a lot of fascinating work. The idea is quite simple. What measures do we have around people, i.e. their engagement, their turnover, the safety metrics, and is there a causal link to operational and financial performance? So in other words, how motivated and engaged and what discretionary effort are your people giving, and are they driving superior business results? A key opportunity in the future is to measure leadership and team effectiveness and track and improve employee engagement and organisational performance. So we like to start our consulting experience with the client by saying, what are we trying to achieve with leadership? What's going to be the impact on the employee and customer experience? And what are the bottom line results that the organisation is trying to achieve? As a result, investment in leadership assessments, coaching and development programs is growing. There's well-validated research to show that this will continue to grow. The coaching experience has changed dramatically in the last 15 years. It's a bit embarrassing now to look back on what it was. It was normally one or two coaching touch points, often with an underperforming manager. There was no sharing with the manager's manager, often not a repeat 360. It was not tied to employee engagement or their leadership of their team. It was just trying to fix difficult issues like underperforming, poor attitudes, poor time management, volatile temper. But now in point 2, we can see building on top of the 6 to 12 month contract with probably half a dozen multiple touch points. We're now also involving the manager of the manager. So typically the manager's manager should be involved in one of the initial coaching experiences, so we're all on the same page. What are we trying to achieve? How will this be linked to the performance appraisal system? And then we want the manager involved towards the end to give feedback about the improvement, hopefully, and to then consolidate what is the ongoing development needs of that individual. And additionally, a very exciting piece of the pie, we encourage the manager to share at a high level their results with their own team, their own direct reports. It takes a lot of trust, a lot of vulnerability, but it's great when a manager will share with their own team, had my 360, here's the strengths, here's the opportunities, let's talk about them. Because often the team can really come up with some great ideas on the improvements around those development opportunities. Number 3, 12 months on, ideally there's a second 360. It builds accountability into the process. You're able to then either celebrate success or, right, we've got to hunker down again and keep working on it. But it's a reality check, and it tells you whether we're making the improvement or not. So the journey is a continuous improvement journey. Self-awareness, there's a famous gentleman called Aristotle. He's got this brilliant quote, self-awareness is the beginning of all wisdom. What a beautiful, beautiful quote. So self-awareness is absolutely critical. And Daniel Goleman, in his pioneering work on emotional intelligence, says that the first step of EQ is to have true self-awareness. The only way you get true self-awareness is to have the 360 in the personality assessments. So point 1, a 360 should measure the self-scores against your raters. So were you overconfident, about right, or a little bit critical? Number 2, we then break down the results by your manager, peers, reports, any other stakeholders. So you can actually see how did the manager see you? How did the peers rate you? Was it collaboration or silos? Your direct reports, and that can tell you how they're travelling. And then we move on to step 3. We shouldn't have a bias, but I love looking at what the direct reports have said about the manager. That's a big clue to the vitality or health of the employee experience. Do they feel engaged? Do they think their manager is a role model? Is the manager getting the best out of them in terms of their behaviour and performance? And that's key to whether they're leading a high-performing team. Then number 4, which is absolutely critical in the process, you've got to have strategic self-awareness. And that only comes from having an external benchmark. So you can't just have an internal benchmark. You've got to say, well, here's my scores and how do they stack up externally to give it that robustness. Motivation and deliberate practice are key to improvement. It's like learning a musical instrument or playing an elite sport, the 10,000 hour rule. Lots of practice, and practice makes perfect. So you won't get the improvement on your 360 without these 2 things. The development goal should only be 1 or 2 or 3, not half a dozen, because you won't do any. The support needed should be identified, the support of the manager, the coach, any training, any studies. Measurements should be agreed at the front, how we're going to track the progress, and we've got to be in agreement that we want to be held accountable. So motivation and deliberate practice are key to changing habits. I'm still a great fan of Stephen Covey's pioneering work, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful Leaders. Habits is often overlooked. We have good habits, bad habits, and that's what the Hogan 360 can pick up on. So point 1, the limbic system is slow to learn. It prefers to stick to what it knows, like driving a car, and it's difficult to change deeply ingrained habits or to build new habits. Number 2, through practice and repetition, new mental muscle can be developed, and then the habits start to become second nature. So this is why we require a lot of commitment. You know, what is going to make you motivated? Is the motivation about your career success, the team you lead being a high-performing team? Are you doing this for your family to be a role model? That motivation will drive the effort. Number 3, the new habits no longer require overt thinking to control. It results in competence, confidence, enhanced reputation, and most importantly, career success. Combining 360 and personality assessments is the most powerful way of giving a scientific platform to the coaching and development program. The Hogan personality, the bright side, the dark side, the inside, combined with our 360, which measures self-management and relationship management, the EQ behaviours, and then working in the business and working on the business, the behavioural competencies aimed at results, both tactical and strategic. So what we capture here is the why and the what, the private and the public person, and then you've got no place to hide. So our philosophy is contained on this slide, steps 1, 2 and 3. We start by saying we'd love to measure and improve leadership effectiveness, and there's really only 3 types of assessments if you leave cognitive to one side. A well-validated suite of personality assessments, a robust 360 and a team assessment, and that way you are measuring the impact of the leader. Number 2, what's the causal link between the leadership and the stakeholders? You look for the employee engagement survey, the customer satisfaction survey, or other measures of the employee and customer experience. And then 3, you're making that connection with business analytics. Are we delivering superior results? Are we achieving the KPIs? Are we an industry leader? So those 3 there typically intuitively make a lot of sense to C-suite executives when you explain it this way. Improving the 360 science, I'm pleased to report there's a lot more science coming into the 360 movement, and as I said earlier, not all 360s are created equally. You've got to have the technical manual to show the reliability and validity. You've got to have rigorous global benchmarks that are updated every year, and you've got to have percentile scores with benchmarking cutoffs, so you could say to someone you're at the 10th percentile, the 50th or the 75th. And best practice these days is companies are saying, why don't we stretch our managers from good to great and aim to be achieving results at that 75th percentile. Customised 360s are huge. I can't tell you how many customised 360s have become popular in recent years. And yes, we can work to develop a customised 360. We try to collaborate on the competency model because we have a lot of expertise about the best competencies, and we can draw on our bank of items to give you well-validated items with benchmarks. But a big word of warning, some organisations are using their own strategies, values and leadership competencies to design their own 360, but there's no validity, there's no benchmarks, there's no technical manual. You're building a house of cards and it's going to end in disaster. The future of 360s, well, the 360 market will continue to grow because it's all aimed at getting a return on investment and building superior business results. So it's not just an investment in individuals, it's an investment in the bottom line. Number 2, measuring the return on investment will continue to challenge us scientifically. There's a big space here for psychologists and researchers and science practitioners to use the science to inform the practice. And number 3, the 2 key metrics will be the employee engagement and the organisational performance and the KPIs. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation today, and I wish you the best of luck in your experiences with 360 assessments. Thank you.